you have to think about the dignity of this question, dignity of this negotiation, dignity or integrity of this integration. My question is, should Ukraine consider territorial concessions to end the war sooner, and what risk does that pose?
Thank you so much, Mr. Kanchan. I believe that the sound issue is still unresolved, but as per your question, I will try to answer to my best capabilities. First of all, you said whether or not Ukraine should concede some part of its territory in order to understand the betterment of the Ukrainians as a nation. What are the opportunity costs in this regard? Well, because of this ongoing fighting, we see almost 1 million households without power in Ukraine. This is, of course, after Russia has attacked the energy grid across various regions. We know that the Berlin peace talks are on the way, and at this moment, everyone on the world, including US President Donald Trump, is of the belief that if they were to concede some of the land, maybe majority of the nation would have survived. If not, economic barriers would have gone down. The situation, as we know, the warlike situation would obviously diminish. So once again, almost a million households are without electricity. After a barrage of overnight Russian strikes, there must be some kind of peace agreement that is solid. It's not just blank words and empty. It has to be a solid agreement between the two sides, and they must agree. And of course, one of the reasons why Russia has shown this kind of aggression is their alliance towards NATO. So Ukraine should, of course, keep its reservations with NATO, remembering that Russia can, of course, at any moment take over their entire nation.
Do you believe Vladimir Putin is unstoppable? He is a diplomacy master. He is a good commander. He is a popular leader in his country, and he is showing to the world that all our kids, he is the master.
Thank you so much for the question. Of course, from all, I would say from the four categories you've said, he is all of the above. At this moment, he has played some kind of a push and pull strategy with the US leader, US President Donald Trump. And we understand that even after sanctioning Russia, it is quite so unstoppable. We have its trading partners, China, South Korea, North Korea, as well as India, to keep its economy stable during these last 3.5 years of war with Ukraine. And of course, it has not sought out any kind of help from its allies, allied nations, but Russia itself is such a vast nation, and I'll give you some of the news. It has some kind of traction with not only Ukraine but with Europe. The German Chancellor Friedrich Merz accused Russian President Vladimir Putin of wanting to restore the old Soviet Union, which was actually split up in 1991. So such a dream can be seen by an ex-KGB agent who had served the Russian military intelligence and is now the leader of Russia. So having such a dream is not far out for the Russian people to have belief in him. Of course, he is unstoppable. I don't see another successor to Vladimir Putin, but in order to make him stop from his expansionism, we must get some kind of guarantee from the NATO alliance so that the NATO does not expand on Russia's borders.
I want to receive a question from our regular viewer, Jannatul Firdaus. By profession, she is a corporate personality. The question from Jannatul Firdaus is, I want to put it to Shamsul Alam Pantho. I think he can face really well this. What's next? She added, looking ahead 6 months, what global flashpoint worries you are the most and why?
Well, of course, I would like to thank the comment coming from social media. What's next is a very vast question for me to answer, but one can definitely say 2026 will be the repercussion of the events that have happened over 2025. We have seen a huge walkout of nations at the UNGA when Benjamin Netanyahu took to the podium. That was one of the highlights, the biggest highlights of this year, as in my opinion, I've seen that face to face. And of course, Donald Trump is met with midterm elections happening in 2026, and how the US people will understand whether or not we should still keep him in the seat of the president, given that he has ignored the Congress, he has ignored the Supreme Courts, and he has given executive orders. Some of these orders are, of course, in violation of international law. I believe the more than 100 people that were killed on these boats off of the Caribbean, and not arresting them, not putting them to trial is, of course, a crime in my viewpoints. And if you want to understand what's next, definitely I'm seeing more wars and more ceasefires breaking out. As I would like to appreciate Mr. Dalton here, that anything that Donald Trump puts into effect of a ceasefire, it eventually falters. We've seen that in various circumstances, including Cambodia and Thailand. We are only awaiting any kind of retaliation between India and Pakistan, another one of those war fronts that Donald Trump claims to have stopped.
Chamili Munir, she's a news personality. Sir, I want to draw your attention, Shamsul Alam Pantho. She asked a very important question. I myself feel it. How might reduced oversight of human rights violations in conflict affected countries, especially she mentioned Sudan, Myanmar, Ukraine, affect global human rights accountability? I think it's a very broad question from Chamili Munir.
Thanks for the question on Facebook from Ms. Shamili Munir. I want to answer it by saying the minute there is violence that erupts in any kind of territory, one must forget that they have any kind of rights. Let me tell you, we've seen over 600 people who were slaughtered in South Sudan just a couple of weeks ago. And what happened, we heard that the rapid military support forces were armed by some Middle Eastern nations, supplied, the arms were supplied from Middle Eastern nations and the Sudanese army, and the rapid support, paramilitary support forces went head to head. And because of this, displacement happened. More than thousands of people had left that said city that was ambushed by the RSF. So that is just one example of human rights violations. If you talk about humanity, there is definitely lacking of UN conventions coming into play. Today we have a news that says almost 6 Bangladeshi peacekeepers have been murdered in a terrorist attack. So the forces of evil, if you would call it, terrorist attacks, and the forces of peace, unity, dignity, humanity, these are always fighting one another. And not only just the example I gave regarding Sudan, it's also in various other places across the world, in Syria, in Israel and Gaza, of course in Ukraine and Russia. All of these war fronts are places where if you are born or if you are a human that reside in such a place, you can be assured that your human rights and dignity have already left the room.
Sir, recently Syrian president after Bashar al-Assad has faced an interview with CNN's Christian Amanpour.
Yes.
He said one thing which I felt very significant. He says the world leaders should understand that regional players should be engaged in peacekeeping, not the outsiders. Later, this line has been criticized and analyzed in different top media outlets. Do you agree on Syria's president's comment that he wants all regional players should create the political path toward broader Israeli-Palestinian peace?
Well, I would like to welcome the statements of the current leader, but if you look back a couple of years ago, Bashar al-Assad was more or less known to be someone allied with the Russians. So this is where that fighting amongst Syria, the US-Russia fighting had happened. And of course, he had been overthrown, and Ahmed al-Shara is now the leader of Syria. But there's the latest news I want to bring out for our viewers. 2 US troops and a civilian were killed, while 3 other service members were injured in an ambush by an ISIS Daesh gunman in Syria, according to the US Central Command CENTCOM. So once again, Syria does have a liability to understand its sovereignty as a nation, to make sure these such events do not occur, because of such occurrence, the US President Donald Trump must have to make a decision how he's going to handle Syria in the future. But his comment that said that every nation should understand how it's going to protect its own borders and no foreign actors should play in the decision making of local rules and regulations, he is quite so correct in saying so. Of course, he is a revolutionary fighter. He was known as a fighter, and the U.S. security forces had designated him as a terrorist before his arrival at the White House. So once again, his intentions towards his nation, his countrymen, and of course on the world political stage is a matter of questioning, matter of time before we understand what kind of leader Syria has now put in its head of state.
Donald Trump has passed 345 days. Still, United States and all countries will have to face him 1110 days more. His administration, his negotiation, his orders, his executive orders. Sir, I just want to know.
Well, no, we do have the possible intervention of divine spirit that might get us over the hump.
All right,
we'll have to see.
But 1110 days is still ahead.
Well,
we have to live with Donald Trump administration.
No, it's
Sir,
possible.
Let's get an take from Shamsul Alam Pantho. Sir, to what extent should other global powers like European Union, NATO, United Nations, ASEAN countries act independently of US leadership?
Well, of course, if you look at it's not no longer a one world order. It is now a multipolar rule of a new world order that's going on, and if, of course, US can't claim that they are the supreme of all of the other nations. We see the rise of China, the Asian giant, coming out. The South China Sea remains disputed. However, the Chinese in general are now the second in line right after the United States, and one cannot ignore the fact that the battle between these two is not only just economic, but of course as well as military competition between the two. But I have a breaking news I want to give before I pass it back to you, Mr. Kanchan. Australian police respond after gunshots are reportedly at Sydney's Bondi Beach. It's an active situation, and Al Jazeera is immediately doing live reporting on its website. So I felt the need to let our viewers know that there is a breaking situation in Sydney's Bondi Beach.